Incredible moment revealed, Outcast CEO in a wheelchair finds unexpected date at wedding. Maxwell Carter couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief as he touched the cold metal of his wheelchair. Once regarded as a sharp-minded business executive in his Midwestern town, he now felt trapped, not just by the physical constraints of his body, but engulfed by an even more insidious imprisonment, the contemptuous stares, the whispered judgments, and above all, the desire to be seen as he once was. His life had unraveled after the accident. Meaningful collaborations faded into forced silence, replaced by the isolation of a man once celebrated but now forgotten, buried under the weight of societal expectations. It wasn't just his career, it was his very essence that felt conspired against. Each day under his mother's watchful eye in the house that felt more like a cage than solace underscored just how far he had fallen. She fussed, tidied, and cared, but deep down, Maxwell yearned for independence, to reclaim at least a slice of the life that raced ahead of him while he remained still. Then the invitation arrived, elegantly embossed in gold lettering. His sister's wedding. It felt like a dagger piercing through the remaining strands of his resolve. The prospect of facing family, friends, and former colleagues stirred a frantic mixture of desire and dread within him. Would they see him as a broken version of who he used to be? Would they whisper once more about his failure, about how he let life slip through his fingers? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As he pushed forward into the wedding's garland-lined community hall, Maxwell felt time freeze. Everything seemed to pulsate with laughter and joy around him, but he was frozen, a statue in the corner, trapped in his own mind. How easily they moved. How easily they loved and laughed. He wished to blend into the walls, to be unnoticed, but he knew that wouldn't suffice. The warmth of familial connection felt like a distant echo. Then came Emma, her laughter punctuating the noise, a breath of life in a room that felt heavy with memories and expectations. Exchange after exchange, sparks flickered between them even as Maxwell sat anchored in his wheelchair, the very chair that felt like a brand upon his being. Just as he began to feel a flicker of normalcy, a familiar face surged through the crowd. Eric, his former rival, the one who thrived on his downfalls, slithered into the light of the celebration. His sharp tongue summoned memories of long ago. Hopes turned bitter. What's next, Maxwell? Board meetings from that chair of yours. Each mocking word cut through Maxwell like glass, igniting tangled emotions he fought to suppress. Could he confront the man who reveled in his lies? Would anyone notice if he remained silent, slipping back into his shadows? But as he met Emma's concerned gaze, clarity illuminated his confusion. This was no longer just his fight. It was a chance to reclaim his dignity, a moment that stretched to encompass all that he had lost. Maxwell's breath quickened, his muscles tensed. Could he truly stand? Could he reclaim not just the man he was but the path forward? The night hung heavy with unanswered questions, and as uncertainty poised itself sharply, the pulse of the room shifted. What would he choose? Would this be the moment when he faced the world, or could he still find solace in being the ghost nobody knew? Maxwell focused on Emma's concerned gaze, feeling the weight of her encouragement anchor his determination. He inhaled deeply, attempting to drown out Eric's taunts that echoed like a drumbeat in the recesses of his mind. Confrontation could be his catalyst, a volatile spark igniting a long-buried fire within. The surrounding chatter faded, and in its place, he felt a throbbing pulse, a clear signal that he was still alive, still capable of feeling, of fighting. What would happen if he chose to stand? The thought lingered, tantalizingly enticing yet tinged with the risk of failure. He glanced around the room, at the faces that had shaped his past, some filled with warmth, others tainted by judgment. Each look appeared to press upon him, and he sensed their muted whispers as if they were tangible shadows, eager to pull him back into anonymity. Yet amongst the cacophony, Emma's presence was electric, a silent vow of solidarity. Maxwell took a moment to steady himself. He envisioned the man he used to be, the confident executive who commanded attention in boardrooms, orchestrating strategy with ease. His heart raced at the thought of breaking free, not just from the wheelchair but from the mental shackles imprisoning him. "Maxwell, are you okay?" Emma's voice broke through his reverie, threading concern with resolve. He nodded, his throat constricted but his voice barely escaping. I need to stand." As he adjusted himself, the reactions began to swell around him. Whispers ricocheted off the plush walls, reviving the uncertainty he desperately tried to escape. He focused on the challenge ahead, the physical and emotional fusion dancing in his veins. His hands gripped the armrests, sweat producing a sheen on his brow. With a determined push, he attempted to lift himself. Time distorted, the room spun slightly. Maxwell locked eyes with Emma again, and that provided the slightest push he needed. Then came the rush of adrenaline, a focused fury that propelled him upward, his heart pounding with each labored inch closer to independence. The effort felt colossal, muscles crying out in protest, yet the ground beneath him felt resolute. He wasn't merely lifting his weight from the chair, he was dragging himself from the abyss of silence and obscurity. With one final heave, Maxwell stood, albeit unsteadily, and the air bristled with energy. His legs wobbled slightly beneath him, but the world seemed to hold its breath. Gasps floated through the audience, startled and astonished. He took a cautious step, the sensation beneath his foot both foreign and familiar. The wave of vulnerability crashed higher, but it was mingled with a defiance that had long been dormant. He was not just the man in the wheelchair, but something much more complex and resilient. Eric's smirk faltered, replaced by hostility mixed with disbelief. "Are you feeling brave, Maxwell? I hope you don't embarrass yourself." The tension ignited. In that moment, Maxwell realized he could flip the narrative. "No," he called out, steadying his voice with a newfound strength. "I'm reclaiming my story." His declaration carved a pathway through the scrutiny and murmurs. Maxwell turned to Emma, who stood there aglow with wonder, her faith now reflected in his resolve. The surrounding faces began to blend into the background. They were no longer his audience, but facets of an arrangement he was beginning to reshape. Yet as he stood there, bathed in half-light and unwavering urgency, the internal question loomed: would he take the next step forward, not just in the room but within his life? The choice felt monumental, reverberating with the weight of all that had been taken from him. And yet, just as clarity struck, a doubt flickered again, a momentary pause before confrontation hit, felt in the pit of his stomach. Maxwell stood at the precipice of not just physical independence but personal triumph, the stakes higher than they had ever been. What awaited him in the next few moments? Would he step forward to challenge Eric, or would fear still clutch at his heart? The room tensed in anticipation, setting the stage for a confrontation that could redefine who he was meant to be. Maxwell stood there, the weight of the moment crashing around him. With his heart pounding, he could feel the heat radiating from Eric's sneering expression, a flicker of triumph igniting beneath the surface. It was as if the room had split in two, on one side, the smirks and raised eyebrows of skeptics, and on the other, the unwavering gaze of Emma, bolstering his resolve with each breath. He had stepped out of the shadows, but doubts entwined with the adrenaline that coursed through him. Could he genuinely withstand the pushback? The thought spiraled in his mind like a current threatening to pull him back down into uncertainty. Eric's voice, dripping with condescension, penetrated the escalating tension. "You thought standing would make a difference? This isn't a fairy tale, Maxwell." But the whispers of negativity were no longer daunting. This was a chance to reclaim his agency, a chance for resolution. He snapped his focus back to Eric, breathing heavily as he steadied himself. The years spent in a chair, drifting through muted conversations and hollow interactions, surged to the forefront of his mind. "I'm not looking for a fairy tale, Eric," Maxwell replied, his voice unexpectedly calm amidst the storm of his emotions. "I'm here to confront my reality, not to hide from it." As he spoke, he felt his body hum with new energy, a stark contrast to the paralyzing fear that had held him captive for so long. He needed to keep this momentum, to harness it into something constructive. The challenge shifted. This confrontation was more than a battle against a former colleague. It was about dismantling the remnants of an outdated identity and emerging as who he was meant to be, an individual capable of crafting his destiny. The murmurs grew more animated, colors flickering as they whispered about his bold stand. Yet somewhere in the background, a nervous thrill flickered within him, a realization that such attention, once overwhelming, could now be wielded like a weapon. He had been painted into a corner, but here he was, summoned to rewrite the script. "Maxwell, why don't you sit back down?" Eric's tone was mocking, but beneath it lay a current of unease. It ignited an instinctive urge within Maxwell. Retreating now would mean succumbing to an old pattern of submission. Taking a deep breath, he intentionally planted his feet firmly on the ground. "I'm done with being put on the sidelines. I'm standing up for what I want, for who I am. From now on, I'll write my own story." Emma's eyes sparkled with approval, her unwavering belief pulling him higher. More than just reclaiming lost ground, he was forging ahead into new territory. The lingering fear began to dissipate. For the first time, he could feel the icy grip of doubt loosen. The weight of vulnerability was still there, yet it transformed into a layered richness, fueling his transformation rather than hindering it. But the road ahead was unmistakably fraught with challenges. Stepping into this new version of himself meant encountering mockery, skepticism, and worst of all, failure. Still, he was learning to feel the edges of that fear. It had been years since he tasted the excitement that accompanied a leap into the unknown, and it was intoxicating. With that realization, Maxwell turned back to Eric, feeling the gears of conflict wind tighter. The anticipated pushback. This could become a pivotal confrontation, a brutal test of his mettle. "After all these years, you think you can still dictate my choices? You're mistaken. I'm ready to hold my ground." Maxwell made eye contact with Eric, who seemed momentarily at a loss. The tide of uncertainty had shifted. For the first time since the fallout, he felt empowered not just to challenge Eric, but to challenge the ghosts of his past. The atmosphere crackled with energy, the anticipation of what he might say next on the tip of every tongue in the room. Would he stand firm, or would doubt reclaim its throne? The answer loomed over him, and the sense of impending resolution hung heavy in the air as Eric's expression hardened, readying for a vicious rebuttal. Only one question lingered: would this moment define him or destroy him? Maxwell's grip on the present moment tightened as he faced Eric, his once dominating presence now eclipsed by the weight of his words. The room remained alive with whispered speculation, a circus of judgment hovering over him like vultures waiting for their prey. Yet, beneath the surface chaos, something unexpected bloomed within him, a wellspring of courage that pushed back against the looming dread. Retreat is no longer an option, he whispered to himself, a mantra that grounded him, fortifying his resolve. Each heartbeat pulsed with a new rhythm, a symphony of determination that reminded him of his own strengths. He felt the urge to forge ahead, to transmute the doubts that clung to his past like a shadow, weaving them into his narrative rather than allowing them to dictate it. "Okay, Maxwell," he thought, momentarily stepping back into himself, reviewing the landscape of his emotions that encircled him. "You've stayed silent for too long. What if this is your turning point?" Challenges lay ahead, deeper than mere confrontation with Eric. Now, each word he chose would be a brushstroke on the canvas of his identity, the defining strokes of a new self-portrait. He could feel the rising anticipation from Emma. This was about more than just Eric, it was about creating a legacy that he could stand behind, a legacy of resilience. "Since when do you back down?" he thought suddenly, redirecting his fight. "Since when do you cringe away from opposition?" "Not today." The internal dialogue grew firmer, echoing in the chambers of his mind, steadying the fractures beneath his surface. Eric, recovering from his momentary confusion, straightened himself like a vine twisting back towards the sun. "You're making a fool of yourself, Maxwell," he spat, his condescension almost palpable. "Do you really think you can pull this off?" Maxwell felt the fire ignite within him. With each word from Eric, he sensed an opportunity not only to reclaim agency but to unveil the layers of his experience that defined him. I may look a little different than your definition of success, Eric, but I'm done trying to fit your mold. I'm redefining what competence looks like." As the disdain seeped from Eric, Maxwell could almost taste the bitterness that permeated the air. It sparked something in him, coaxing forth his resolve like the upward thrust of a shoot through the earth, breaking through the constraints that bound it. The realization surfaced that this was not merely about confronting Eric but about sealing the cracks of fragility he had once occupied. "Will it hurt?" he pondered. "Yes." "Will there be doubts?" "Certainly." Yet, he was no longer the passive figure at the conference table, allowing others to speak for him while he quietly blended into the background. He was ready to vocalize his narrative and claim a new space for himself, one where failure was not shunned but embraced as a fellow traveler on the road to discovery. With newfound determination, he raised his voice. "What I've learned over the years is that every step matters, even the missteps. You don't get to dictate my path anymore, Eric. You can scoff at my choices, but you'll never erase the strength they've given me." As those words hung in the air, he felt the room shift. The tide of support surged from Emma, buoying him like a life raft tossed into a tempest. He could see Eric's bravado begin to falter, a crack in the armor of arrogance. But beneath the surface, doubt still lingered, whispering uncertainties that clawed at him like an insidious sibling of fear. "Will I have what it takes to carry this momentum forward?" Maxwell thought. The weight of the decision loomed large. Every minute spent resisting was a minute lost in his transformation. "And if they don't accept me for who I am turning into?" The question resonated deep within him, echoing in the chambers of his growing conviction. This was the very heart of his journey to discover that acceptance began with him first, that he eagerly awaited Eric's response, tension band straining within him, poised on the precipice of transformation. Would he continue the fight or retreat into his past? Maxwell inhaled sharply, the air electrified with the promise of revelation. One thing was clear, the path forward would demand everything he had, and he was ready to confront whatever lay ahead. Where would that lead him next? Maxwell stood at the crossroads of his past and future, the echo of his last words still vibrating in his ears. He felt a palpable shift in the atmosphere of the room. It was as if time had paused, waiting for an evolution to take shape. He had committed to this moment, a leap into the unknown fueled by urgency and vulnerability. Yet, with that leap came an unsettling awareness of the battleground ahead. The fire inside him ignited a whirlwind of thoughts. What's next? He mused. Would he stem the tide of Eric's derision? Would he find supporters in unexpected corners? He relished the familiar charge of excitement, a sensation he relegated to mere nostalgia for too long. Now or never, he told himself, setting his posture with subtle authority. He observed Eric, whose expression hung somewhere between incredulity and irritation. The latently sharp edge of ridicule in Eric's presence was still a weight on Maxwell's shoulders. This isn't just about today. This is the beginning, an alteration of self that must be communicated clearly. Maxwell, Eric started, his voice cutting through the silence. You're throwing away everything for a fleeting moment of self-righteousness. Do you truly think this will lead to anything meaningful? The words were intended to deflate him, but instead, they crystallized his aim. No, Eric. This is about authenticity. It's about understanding my worth beyond your approval. He felt that undercurrent pulse among the attendees. Emma, her eyes sparkling with a mix of admiration and anxiety, others, their expressions a cacophony of judgment and intrigue. As if sensing that the collective gaze held transformative power, he embraced it. He had been too long under the spectral influence of others, he wasn't merely speaking to Eric anymore. This was a rallying cry for everyone who had been trapped under the weight of expectation. I'm here for the potential for growth, he declared, voice steady with conviction. Not just mine. But for everyone who has had to negotiate their worth within the confines of unyielding definitions. We are more than labels. With each utterance, a tapestry of his journey began to unfurl. Memories swept through him, each misstep, every lesson woven into a narrative that now felt like armor rather than shackles. Though his pulse quickened, the sense of resolve surged stronger. A flicker of incredulity passed across Eric's face. You really believe this will resonate? You think they'll forgive your mistakes? Maxwell locked eyes with Emma, drawing strength from her unwavering gaze. I am not here to ask for their forgiveness. I'm here to show that mistakes are part of the growth process. I embrace them as lessons that shape who I am and what I can become. The room erupted with a sudden silence, and in that space, he could hear the melodies of possibility, his voice, unearthing fragments of shared experience in the willing hearts surrounding him. How many others felt trapped, manipulated by perception? He had transcended mere defense, he laid bare his soul before them, and they could either reject it or recognize their own reflection in his struggle, yet, a nagging question surged within: had he revealed too much? Had he unwittingly opened the floodgates for doubt? The thoughts whispered like shadows, reminding him of the risks inherent in vulnerability. But something new snaked courageously through those doubts. This was a reclamation, a rebirth. Let's take a step back, he thought, momentarily interrogating the potential repercussions. There was no turning back now, though. The energy in the room had shifted, taking on a life of its own, swirling around him, electrified by anticipation, while Eric's frown deepened, the crowd's gaze flickered. He sensed it, that burgeoning understanding, hope woven into his words. And yet, a singular notion pulsed through his mind: he wasn't done. Not yet. This was merely the opening gambit in a game of tenacity and transformation, revealing more than just who he was, but who he could potentially become. And in the corner of his conscience, a question remained. Would he dare to take it further? Would he persist through the inevitable backlash? As the energy coalesced around him, his eyes met Emma's once more, her silent support enveloping him like a warm embrace. There had to be a moment where he could shift the dynamics forever. He turned back to Eric, a steely determination rising within him. The true test is just beginning. Are you brave enough to engage in this dialogue? The weight of questions hung thick in the air as he awaited a response, ready to seize whatever came next, fully aware that his evolution was not yet complete. The tension in the room thickened, almost tactile. Eric's brow furrowed, as if weighing the gravity of Maxwell's challenge against the scales of threat and opportunity. Maxwell felt the energy shift, eyes boring into him with anticipation. It wasn't antagonism he sensed, it was curiosity, edged with a hint of unease. He had thrust himself into a crucible of self-examination, and now he was performing on a stage that magnified every vulnerability. Dialogue? Eric scoffed, but the challenge hung in the air like an electric current. Sensing the pivot of thoughts among the crowd, Maxwell leaned into this momentum, the room breathing with the shared tension of his unveiling. Yes, Eric. Dialogue. His voice was steadier now, the tremors of uncertainty slowly fading away. Real conversation about what we fear and what we aspire to be. Aren't we all tired of hiding behind false facades? Every day we grapple with our reflections, the masks we wear. Wouldn't it be liberating to strip those away? Doubt trickled in, a small nagging voice questioning the wisdom of his boldness. Yet, the empowering image of himself beyond this moment emerged, no longer shackled by Eric's derisive laughter or the judgment of others. Wasn't authenticity the intricate thread that could weave a new narrative for him, one that honored his evolution? Around him, murmured responses flitted through the crowd. Emma's gaze ignited a flicker of courage, grounding him. I may have faltered, Eric, but I've altered my trajectory. What we define as mistakes are merely stepping stones. I stand here not seeking a shield against your words, but offering a chance to reconsider our perspectives. A ripple of surprise cascaded through the attendees, their expressions fluctuating between doubt and intrigue. Light glinted off the surface of his vulnerability like fresh dew, transforming into an unexpected catalyst for connection. If he could absorb the scrutiny, maybe they too could find ways to unlock their own convictions, but with this fresh momentum came the remnants of his internal battle. Was he willing to navigate the murky waters of past mistakes for the sake of a richer dialogue? Each heartbeat amplified the stakes. He was now charting an emotional territory fraught with the potential for misunderstanding. Is this a plea for validation? Eric penetrated the moment with practiced skepticism, his voice laden with disdain. Or simply a call to indulge in self-pity? No, Maxwell replied, cutting through the condescension with newfound clarity. This is a challenge to see beyond our past actions. Forgive me if the notion disappoints you, but there is wisdom in those who have fallen. I'm inviting you, Eric, to explore the space between failure and resurgence. Familiar churns of anxiety wrestled with Maxwell's surge of determination. The stakes were rising. He risked it all, balancing on the tightrope of self-discovery. Every second stretched taut, and somewhere beneath the spotlight of scrutiny, a question surfaced: could he emerge from the shadows of judgment, not only with a renewed sense of self but with others embracing their narratives as well? The atmosphere transformed as murmurs simmered within the audience. Confidence danced alongside apprehension as he read their faces. This connection, this moment was more real than any experience he'd chased in the past. He was sculpting something tangible, an awakening of sorts, not merely for himself, but for everyone willing to listen. Realization dawned within him: the battle was no longer about him versus Eric. It was a collective engagement with truths that demanded acknowledgement, severing old frameworks that fostered isolation. Maxwell sensed the crowd's tentative unity pulse like a heartbeat, their thoughts burgeoning into a shared consciousness. As he held Eric's gaze, confronted the challenge that simmered behind his bravado, everything shifted. He was ready to unveil another layer of this dialogue, one rooted in not just mere words but actionable insights. Let us move beyond this moment. Let us connect beyond our differences. I'm not here to win anyone over or to gather applause. I'm here to demonstrate that growth emerges from grappling with adversity. And aren't we all grown-ups navigating the messiness of life? He stepped forward, the weight of his past shifting imperceptibly against the strength of his resolve. Could this opening act transform into something greater, or would he be left standing amidst echoes of dismissal, with the walls of apprehension closing in? Maxwell braced himself. A single step could alter everything. So, what is it going to be, Eric? Will you engage, or remain entrenched in your disdain? At that moment, the door of possibility creaked ajar, holding the promise of confrontation and potential resolution. Uncertainty lingered. The room awaited Eric's retort, and Maxwell's heart raced as uncertainties whirled. He was about to discover just how far this journey of authentic engagement would take him. The silence stretched, a taut wire humming with unspoken words. Maxwell stood at the precipice of both transformation and potential rejection, Eric's gaze a storm of skepticism swirling beneath the surface. It was a flickering moment, a single heartbeat that anchored Maxwell's resolve. You think you're brave, Eric finally replied, voice 2 notes flat, sarcasm dripping from each syllable. But you're just another coward hiding behind your platitudes. Real courage is what I show by keeping it real. Maxwell felt an icy grip of frustration cloud his thoughts. Eric's disdain was a gnarled hand reaching out, attempting to snatch his burgeoning confidence back into the abyss. The crowd's expectant gazes heightened the pressure, and Maxwell's instinct retaliated. He fought the urge to retreat. Instead, he embraced a deeper vulnerability that had been brewing beneath the surface, a place saturated with understanding and resolve. Being real doesn't mean being cruel, Eric, he replied, his voice calm yet firm, resonating with a sincerity that defied Eric's jabs. Authenticity isn't an excuse for the absence of compassion. Maybe it's time we redefine the meaning of strength. He drew a breath, concentrating on the warmth flooding through his veins, dispelling the chill of confrontation. In this intricate dance of words, he sensed his footing firming. Not only did he carry his own doubts, but now he bore the concerns of others surrounding him. What if this moment of genuine dialogue forged a connection that could alter his narrative forever? I'm not perfect, Maxwell continued, pivoting from defense to openness, but I've learned that the best growth springs from the willingness to show our flaws. When was the last time you shared something you're afraid of? Something you've hidden that eats away at you? The question hung in the air, an uninvited but insistent inquiry that cut through the hostility cloaked in bravado. Maxwell's heart thudded as he watched Eric, a glimmer of uncertainty flickering across his face. For a fraction of a second, Eric's defensive armor cracked. Could it be that he, too, craved something more than this performance of dominance? The tension in the room morphed, a palpable shift of energy fueling different possibilities. In essence, this was not merely about opposing positions, it was about wielding a much broader concept of strength that embraced the complex tapestry of human experience. Courage isn't found in dishing out pain, Maxwell admitted, turning his voice low, raw yet hopeful. It's found in the ability to confront our shadows and invite others to share theirs. We become stronger when we acknowledge our shared humanity. Watching Eric, he felt an acute awareness that this was not just about winning over a skeptic. The room had breathed in his words, and Maxwell sought connection with each person present. It was not about labels or judgments, but the act of revealing oneself in all their messy intricacies. Eric blinked, pulling himself back into the realm of reality, but the contemplative space Maxwell created remained, like a tether that bound them together in uncertainty. I don't have to like you, Maxwell, Eric finally breathed, voice much softer, but I get what you're saying. Maxwell sensed an open door, the crowd, too, shifted slightly, a collective breath held and released. There was no final resolution, but rather an invitation to continue this journey together. The groundwork had been laid, and he realized that true engagement was as complex as a labyrinth, filled with turns and detours that all led to deeper understanding. Reflecting on his own bravery and newly bloomed audacity, he vowed to navigate this path with newfound intention, knowing that the pursuit of authenticity was a lifelong endeavor. But as he surveyed the now murmuring crowd, one filled with questions layered over their assumptions, Maxwell couldn't shake a lingering curiosity. What heights could they all reach if they truly embraced their vulnerabilities? Maybe it was time to unravel the next layer of this transformative dialogue. Let me ask you all something, he called out, the stakes shifting yet again. What's the one thing you've wished to share but have kept to yourself? Let us break the cycle together. And in that charged moment, the air hummed with anticipation, for they were about to embark on a voyage toward collective revelation, one that could fracture lives or mend them in unexpected ways. Maxwell felt the weight of the room shift again, energies coiling around him like spring-loaded traps ready to be sprung. The question he posed lingered like the scent of fresh rain, inviting yet overwhelming, promising deep connection or potential chaos. He gathered his breath, standing tall in the face of uncertainty. One by one, familiar faces began to unravel, sharing hesitant truths that echoed his own journey. They spoke of insecurities, fear of failure, the longing for approval, desires buried so deep that even they had forgotten them. An atmosphere crackled with vulnerability, stroking the edges of what was once muted and restrained. Whether it was Anne, a once professional executive specialist, turned social media strategist whose voice quivered at the edges, or Ray, the sharp-tongued finance guru who typically wielded cynicism like a shield, each revelation ripped through the fabric of pretense. Their candidness sparked something in Maxwell, a grim satisfaction while simultaneously shrinking his own perceived dilemmas. Eric, standing slightly apart, morphed from a figure of disdain into an interested observer. The jaded edge from his earlier demeanor dissolved, and questions flickered in his eyes, igniting a curious light. Was he contemplating his own hidden fears, stirred from the depths? Maxwell felt a strange kinship forming with him, a fellow traveler on this treacherous terrain of self-discovery, but beneath the surface of transformative dialogue, uncertainty lingered within Maxwell. The fear of stepping too far from his roots clawed at him. He had willingly traversed into a fraught space. What if he faltered? What if the support he sought evaporated, leaving him stranded on a precarious ledge? He reminded himself of the commitment he had made to authenticity, a promise that opened new avenues and closed others. With each shared secret, a burning curiosity seized Maxwell. He felt the pull of what was left unsaid, his own undisclosed doubts lurking in the shadows. Did his rare moment of clarity hold the potential to help him navigate the clouds of self-doubt hovering over his head? Every one of us is grappling with our demons, he replied, scanning the crowd, recognizing their steady yearning for validation. What if we embraced these truths together? When we reflect our experiences, we can chart maps that guide us toward understanding. The murmurs shifted again, resonating with agreement but tinged with trepidation. Would they dare to take this shared step further, transforming vulnerability into strength, and discomfort into growth? Maxwell knew this journey was far from linear, it required daring to occupy the middle grounds. Difficult challenges lay ahead, moments that demanded grit. And yet, as he sifted through the tangled layers of connection deepening around him, the intuitive stirrings in his heart burned brighter. Maybe our most profound growth comes when we stop pretending all is well, he ventured. What is it to risk vulnerability in a world that often punishes honesty? And how do we move from standing solo to navigating life in tandem? Before any responses could form, a crack in the narrative opened. An unfamiliar voice sliced through the chatter, raw and unsteady. I was once like you, standing on the outskirts of my own existence, a woman began, her voice gaining strength. But I learned that every time we reveal ourselves, we cast aside chains that keep us confined. Maxwell's heart quickened. The way forward seemed to pulsate at the core of this dialogue, an authentic exploration not just of ideas, but of human shared experiences. What secret might her words unlock? And so, as her story unfolded, a new tension bubbled beneath the multilayered complexity of emerging narratives. What might be uncovered next, not only within her tale but in the depths of the men and women around him? Determined, Maxwell leaned in further, ready for the next transformative discussion to emerge, understanding deep down that each shared moment brought them closer to uncharted territory where revelations could dismantle barriers or forge unprecedented pathways of connection. How have our stories shaped you? He asked, heart racing, knowing this inquiry may lead to profound introspection. What lesson must we learn as we delve into the intricacies of our interwoven lives? As the woman's voice filled the space again, Maxwell sensed the gravity of the shifting narrative. In revealing their truths, what new and unforeseen challenges awaited on this path toward deeper understanding? The woman's voice dipped into an intimate space as she shared her past, revealing layers of struggle and triumph. Maxwell absorbed her journey, a montage of vulnerability illuminating the nuances of her experience. Each story tethered her more firmly to the room, softening raw edges and igniting resonances he hadn't expected. Fear held me captive, just as it does many of you, but I came to realize that my worth isn't defined by my successes or failures, she explained, courage sparking behind her words. It's the authenticity of my existence that matters. Maxwell felt the tide of her narrative wash over him, stirring unplumbed depths within. What if he could truly grasp that concept, internalize such a sentiment in both his personal and professional life? He was no stranger to the clutches of perfectionism. The struggle for validation had entangled him for so long that it was comforting in its familiarity. He yearned to move past this complacent acceptance. Once and for all. As stories began to flow more freely around the room, Maxwell's resolve solidified. Their raw honesty was forging a solidarity he hadn't anticipated. Picking up the threads of their struggles, he found himself contemplating the impact of vulnerability as a currency of connection. Could this collective honesty not only enhance his understanding of others but also illuminate unseen corridors within himself? And nervously interjected, I've always felt inadequate, especially stepping into my new role. Some days, I question if I even belong. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she searched the room for validation. And there it was, a gentle tether. A hand reached out, brushing against her shoulder. Ray offered a reassuring nod, eyes warm with recognition. We all feel like imposters sometimes, don't we? He replied, the cynic peeling back layers to reveal a more genuine self. But what if, instead of hiding, we embraced that feeling? What if we understand that it's part of the journey? Maxwell's heart raced as he considered this shift. What if he allowed himself to be seen in this authenticity he so fervently discussed? Would revealing his doubts and insecurities allow more genuine relationships to flourish? A weight shifted as if the very walls of the room trembled in anticipation, and a deep yearning clawed at him, urging him to break down his own barriers. The truth felt both daunting and liberating, like surfacing from a long, drowning struggle. Would he dare to follow suit, unravel his own fears alongside theirs? Gathering courage, he leaned forward, palms sweaty against the cool surface of the table. I often feel unworthy in my role as a leader. The pressure to uphold a strong facade often drowns out my voice. I crave connection, but what if I let you all down by not being enough? The energy shifted palpably as those sentiments hung in the air, his vulnerability bouncing off the walls like a live wire. The onlookers fixed their gaze on him, honoring his honesty with quiet recognition, challenging him to relinquish the weight of expectations. I dare you to shed that burden, a voice emerged from Eric, firm yet unexpectedly gentle. Because only when you admit your shortcomings can you truly lead, not through perception, but by being real. Maxwell's breath hitched, his mind racing with implications. He had always shied away from the abyss of unfiltered truth, but now, there existed a mysterious allure, a necessity to dive deeper into the human experience. Was this moment a profound turning point, or a fleeting spark in the chaos of his life? The realization hung heavy in the air, amplifying the tension within him. Here, in this very room, forgiveness for imperfections grew palpable, but what still lay ahead in their collective journey? He could feel the rise of energy as others readied themselves to contribute, a budding vulnerability swirling around him, a burgeoning resolve strengthened in the shared space. In that electric moment, he realized the need for honesty and courage to chart untraveled paths. Every shared truth beckoned uncharted territory. Maxwell sensed the stirring of profound connections just beneath the surface. What lies ahead for us as we dig deeper? He wondered aloud, the words tumbling from his mouth, uncertain yet charged with possibility. Would they all embrace this ongoing conversation, even as it threatened to unravel the very fabric they had carefully woven around their identities? As silence enveloped them, Maxwell felt the weight of the unknown press against his chest. Would they take this leap into the intricate tapestry that their stories were beginning to create, and would he have the strength to navigate the revelations sure to come? Maxwell stood amidst the buzz of exhilaration and uncertainty, feeling each heartbeat resonate with a newfound clarity. The moment was electric. The swirl of authentic conversation had transformed the space, merging the shadows of isolation into a unified tapestry of experience. He had ventured beyond mere brave declarations. He had become the architect of this evolving dialogue that and the powerful aftermath of vulnerability shared. Maxwell felt not just supported but also empowered, walking the thin line between trepidation and exhilaration with grace. Each revelation from those around him served as a mirror reflecting their mutual struggles, the unrefined essence of the human experience. He no longer felt like an outcast, but rather a part of something greater, a community wrapped in the complexity of life, human connection coalescing into strength. With assertive resolve, he chose to delve deeper, pushing through the initial discomfort for the sake of clarity and resolution. "Let us unpack this together," he implored, his voice rich with sincerity. "What if by sharing our fears, we birth ideas that can help us reshape our identities?" The room vibrated with agreement, an undercurrent of understanding weaving through the audience as they leaned into this challenge point. One by one, his peers stepped forward, transformed from silent observers into sharers of their hidden narratives. Michael, the once closed-off manager, spoke of doubt overcoming his enthusiasm. Lisa revealed her anxiety about making choices that seemed far removed from her expectations. Each story unraveled tension, highlighting similarities and stitching unity with strands of shared experience. The moment crystallized for Maxwell, a realization dawning within him. This exchange transcended the personal. It was a collective reclaiming of identity in a world framed by judgment, echoing a universal theme of resilience. He recognized that their growth was twofold, a metamorphosis within each individual and a communal evolution where the significance of shared experience emerged as paramount. Maxwell's heart swelled as he witnessed a robust connection flourish among the gathering. The judgments and insecurities they had all carried transformed into fuels of empowerment. Those whispered doubts that once mocked him now glimmered as lessons, unfolding opportunities ripe for development. Taking a deep breath, Maxwell addressed Eric once again, inviting engagement without enmity. "What if we redefine our interactions? Your insights are important, just as mine are. When we lend a voice to the tension, we have the power not just to navigate it but to enlighten ourselves through it." This time, instead of withering under Eric's contempt, he stood firm, pushing past the old narrative of rivalry baked into their history. The air crackled with potential, shifting toward even more meaningful dialogue. Eric's demeanor softened, his facial features easing into contemplation. "I'll admit, Maxwell, your approach is a lot more complex than I initially dismissed," he replied, with a hint of vulnerability sneaking through his skepticism. "Maybe there's merit to the idea that we hold value in sharing our uncertainties." With that exchange, the room erupted into a shared conversation, shifting tides that encouraged unfamiliar perspectives to surface. Maxwell felt a swell of achievement rush through him. Not only had he confronted his own limitations, but he had also fostered an environment ripe for growth and understanding among all present. As laughter intermingled with personal anecdotes, a palpable change in the atmosphere enveloped everyone. By tearing down old barriers, they experienced the beauty of connection forged through authenticity, a collective warmth that quashed fear and celebrated evolution. Instead, Maxwell absorbed the radiant energy, feeling it fill the spaces that once echoed with doubt and fear, his own evolution radiating through his core. He realized his journey was not solely about reclaiming who he was but redefining who he could become, solidified by this newfound recognition of shared humanity. In this moment, he achieved not just personal victory but a harmony of understanding woven through collective vulnerability. Standing tall yet humble before his peers, he proclaimed, "This is just the beginning. We've ideated a space for transformation that invites us to engage constantly." The crowd's murmur underscored their commitment. They would transcend their fears to shape their future narratives. Against the backdrop of laughter and shared stories, Maxwell felt a profound sense of fulfillment wash over him. He had not only confronted the shadows of judgment but also emerged as a pioneer of authenticity, leading a movement grounded in understanding the truest reflection of his essence. This was not merely a public reclaiming of his identity, it was a definitive alignment of purpose, a commitment that radiated far beyond the room, propelling everyone into their own futures with renewed resolve. Maxwell Carter had, against the odds, proven to himself and to the world that he was more than his wheelchair. He was a leader, a catalyst for connection, and a true embodiment of resilience. Now is the time for you to step forward. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can inspire your own transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and encourage more content that uplifts and empowers. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible ending, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Your support is what drives these stories to reach those who need them most.